I would like to ask the audience to put yourself in a hypothetical situation of living in a big city, a city that is expensive to live in. You're 20 years old, have to go to school, pay rent, and work a minimum wage job because you don't have the necessary requirements for a big time job. What would you want? A lot of states have a different minimum wage from the federal minimum wage. However, some cities within certain states may even need a higher minimum wage than that. A city having a minimum wage is not common, but it should be something happening more often. Some cities are very expensive to live in, and it is just flat out necessary for some cities to have higher minimum wages. By researching minimum wages in cities all across the U.S., I've come to discover that some of the most expensive cities to live in the U.S. have begun to develop a city-wide minimum wage. In this speech, I'll explain how it is a great idea for more cities to utilize the notion of having their own minimum wage. My main 3 points are that there are cities in the United States that are simply just really expensive to live in, and with a raised minimum wage, people can be better off. If there was only a state or federal minimum wage, some cities would be left with a lot more poor people than others. And finally, low-income workers can benefit by rising minimum wages because of the potential rise to higher income. For my first point, I would like to say that the highest cost of living index in the United States is New York City, where the minimum wage is $15. A site called Numbeo explains the cost of living index as a relative indicator of consumer goods prices, including groceries, restaurants, transportation, and utilities. Rent and mortgage are not included in this calculation. So for the cost of living index, New York City is using a lot of people that need to pay for consumer goods prices and groceries, and they're working minimum wage jobs, and $15 is a sufficient amount for them to pay for these things. Richard Faloni, writing on behalf of research done by Kevin Rins and John Voorhees, explains, they indicate that higher wages for lower earners could decrease employee turnover, benefiting employees as well as workers. For my second point, Faloni explains, in their working paper, The Distributional Effects of Minimum Wages, economists Kevin Rins and John Voorhees argue that a minimum wage increase of 37%, which is the same one that Seattle has recently enacted, in the years leading up to the Great Recession, would have slowed down the increasing degree of income inequality in the United States that has been occurring for the last 45 years. Therefore, if a city would have had a minimum wage other than a state or federal minimum wage, then the Great Recession could have been slowed down and may not have even happened. The main point of Rins and Voorhees' argument is summed up well by Faloni. Raising the minimum wage benefits a large majority of low-income workers by putting them on a path to higher earnings in the long term, and that in turn decreases inequality and leads to a healthier economy. Therefore, they back up their previous point by saying that raising the minimum wage would therefore slow down income inequality, therefore boosting the economy. Another writer, Peter Dreyer, explains, at kitchen tables, in coffee shops, in offices and factories, and in newsrooms, Americans began talking about economic inequality, corporate greed, and how America's super rich have damaged our economy and our democracy. Therefore, by giving the poor a chance to sort of catch up to the rich people, then it gives them a way out, leading us to the third point, which is low-income workers can benefit by rising minimum wages because of the potential rise to higher income. Dreyer also claims this upsurge in government-mandated wage hikes has not come about suddenly. It is the result of years of changing conditions, effective grassroots organizing, and changing public views about the poor. People have begun to want to help the poor, and now with rising minimum wages, this does help them and gives them a path to working higher level jobs. And making more money while working a lower quality job will give people a pathway to a higher job in the future by paying for school and beefing up resumes. The main way to get a good job is to have good schooling and also to have prior work experience. Without money, it is virtually impossible to do either of those things because school costs money, and then you have to make money by working a lower job before getting a higher job. With all of this information, do you feel like poor people deserve more in big cities? Some of the most hardworking people in our country are hidden because of low minimum wages in certain cities. Los Angeles and New York are among cities working for higher minimum wages than their statewide, and more cities will follow suit. Hopefully, those cities will boost their minimum wages to help the low-income people in their cities and overall boost their economy and our country's economy. Thank you for listening.